Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos, back for another episode. My friend, Vasili, what's going on, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing well, Yariv. Season is finally over. At least for the Flyers, there won't be any more games for us to cover, stuff like that. But with the exit interviews and just a lot kind of fluctuating around the team, we're going to have a lot to cover throughout the offseason. So we're still going to be bringing out the Flyers coverage. And as the playoffs go along, we'll touch on that too. So I'm doing well, and I'm excited to be back and just talk, the exit interviews and kind of wrap up the season in general.
Yeah, dude. We can sound off to this season. Dun, 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 dun. All right. The end of the season is here. The playoffs are here. And with the end of the season come the exit interviews. We'll do most of the time focusing on the exit interviews in the beginning here. And then we'll do a Phantoms update. They just won their first game. Pretty exciting. Vasily and I both did get to watch that game, so we'll talk about that. We'll do a little Central Scouting update, and then we'll talk about our playoff predictions. So let's get into it. There's a lot of quotes, a lot of conversations. There were two 30-minute interviews, one with Briere and one with Tortorella, and then there were a slew of interviews, obviously exit interviews with the players. Not every single player was interviewed that played for the Flyers this year, but definitely the entire core. I did go through and listen to every one of those interviews. I don't remember every bit of it. Sorry, everybody. And we do have we do have the transcripts. So again, we're gonna go off of memory, but I tried to listen to both Briere and Tortorella twice. And then I listened to the other interviews, just in a row, because they were just coming in. So a lot of stuff to go over, but that we learned a lot, which is cool. Let's get into just first overall. Let's start with the players. I feel like there was a lot said by Tortorella and Briere, and we'll get into that next. So let's start a little bit just with the players itself. One thing I took away, and I believe Farabee mentioned something like this, Provorov kind of hinted to the fact that he doesn't like this element, but that the players don't feel like they're in a rebuild. You hear the way they talked about Sean Couturier. If we had Couturier, if we had Atkinson, they don't feel like this is a long road from being competitive. And look, people might agree with that or not agree with that. One, that's the right attitude that they should have, in my opinion. Again, these guys are supposed to feel like winners. So it means that they feel like that they can win. You give them some help that they can win. Like they believe that. But it also just, to me, and Vasily, maybe you agree with this, it feels to me like that's a reflection of what Tortorella has instilled in here, where they are pretty confident in the system that they're in place, in the progress that they've made, in the fact that they see that they've been highly competitive in all of these games. They're not getting blown out. They are a Sean Couturier, a Cam Atkinson, maybe another player away from all of a sudden putting up that extra goal, maybe two goals that they need, where they pull the goalie and then you see they're down by two, right? Like all those moments, all those instances that we talked about this year where it came down to one goal. Maybe the score reflected more because they pulled the goalie with 4 minutes left. They pulled them twice and they lost by 3 in the end. But most of those games, they were ultimately decided by one goal until an empty net was pulled. And I would say it's definitely more than half of our losses. I didn't look that up, but you can just feel it, right? I guess I'd have to challenge myself on that. Maybe we'll look that up later. But what do you think, Vasily?
Yeah, well, just to jump off, I was planning to get kind of nerdy with stuff and get into a bunch of statistics surrounding the team actually the
Still have
next
the
couple
off
of
season.
weeks. Yeah, so we're gonna dive into even more stuff the next couple of weeks. I'm interested. I wanted to actually search that up as well, just to see what the exact number is on the one goal games, because I think that's a great point. That's something I wanted to bring up actually. That just the fact that if you look at the team's performances this season, right? How many times are they in close games or losing by empty netters or within one goal, in the last couple minutes and then lose? So I think that kind of attitude where the players think and are kind of exuding the exit interview, saying, we're not actually that far off, guys. I think that's where that comes from, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
that swagger, because they did have stretches this season where they played well as a collective unit and did play well against pretty good teams that were also in the race, right? So I think that plays into it. Also, Tortorella, obviously, the identity, the structure. I mean, look at last season's team just in terms of like their structure defensively. This season, I mean, they weren't that great defensively either, but just if you look at the comparison between last year's team and this year's team, it's pretty much night and day just in terms of like the backdoor goals you're giving up, the type of back-breaking goals you're giving up. I don't think they were doing as often. So I think for the player perspective, it makes sense that in the exit interviews they have that kind of opinion. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Tony D'Angelo kind of brought something up, and we'll get into Tony specifically later on, right? Because he's a big interview that they kind of went off on, especially with the 5-game scratching and all that to end the year. But he mentioned something saying that the team finishes with 75 points, and that's a record of 31, 38, and 13. In the Eastern Conference, like Florida makes it in with 92 points. The Flyers are what? So they're 17 points back. I mean, and they lost 13 games in overtime this season. So it just shows like how close, right, they kind of are to that other level of making to the playoffs. Not to say that that's the goal or that's a realistic expectation going into next year, because we don't really know what the
We don't
roster is going to
know.
look like,
We'll
or
talk
or
about
who's
that.
going to be removed, or what
Yeah.
what it's going to be like. But I mean, if you just look at it based on the points, and you do get a guy like Couturier back, a guy like Atkinson back, how do those 13 games in overtime go? How do those other close 1-goal games go? We've kind of talked about that all season. So I think that's
Yeah.
kind of why you see the players bring that up, and kind of do have confidence that, hey, next year it could be more positive and closer to where we want to be than everybody's kind of giving them credit for, right?
Yeah. And again, we talked about that all year. I was screaming when I mean, I remember how intense I got when Couturier got injured, because I was like, well, there go playoffs. Like that's how I felt immediately. I said, there
Yeah.
goes Chuck Fletcher's job. I'm like, I don't know how he's gonna keep it. It's not gonna
Well, it's
happen
hard
unless
to
he.
make the playoffs without your first line center,
Uh,
which we saw this season. So
yeah, it for this team, it's impossible. It was
yeah,
it
for
because
most
it.
teams though, right?
But
Like,
it specifically the situation we were going into, though. It's literally
yeah,
we had no centers to start the year. Like we had to develop two centers
basically
in
rookies.
season.
Yeah.
Yes. We had one guy who was completely unproven, then the other guy who was a left winger. Our center won't even one of our centers probably won't even be here next year. Like our situation is very bad down the middle.
Yeah,
Like
no.
really, really bad. You cannot make the playoffs that way. Yeah, you can't be a competitive team that way. It's just not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. You can pretend, you can even have elite wingers and try to compensate, but you will hit a wall. It's not going to work out for you. And you've seen that quite a bit. You just need to have at least competent centers that are veterans, that are, can play at a high level in a top 6 role. Like that's bare minimum. Like the role that Scott Lawton was playing at some point, like that's, he's not supposed to be a second line center in the NHL. That's bare minimum what you need. And we thank God we had Lawton. It was an ugly year. um, and any more to say on the rebuild thing? I just felt like overall, I think it was nice to hear. You know, I don't want to hear them. The one thing I'll say about what Provorov, let's get into Provorov. We'll just go right into him. When I listened to Provorov talk, I thought he actually had a pretty good interview. Really, honestly, I thought really professional stuff out of him in comparison to last year's, where he kind of went after Jordan Hall. If you know Jordan Hall, and I know Jordan Hall, he is like the nicest guy. You could tell that it was just a contentious relationship with the media in general, not Jordan Hall. Because in fact, Jordan Hall is probably on the opposite end of that spectrum. He's probably the guy defending Provorov most of the time. And you looked at his interview this year, I know people are going to look into stuff. We were just talking about it a little bit off camera. But, I still don't get a strong sense. I understand what's happening in the background. And shout out to Anthony Sanfilippo. If you guys listen to Snow the Goalie, he pretty much says, Provorov's gone. You can hear other people saying it. I don't know. Again, we talked about it on this show. I still don't see that reflected on the on-ice decisions. But, he didn't seem like happy in the interview. I'll say that. It just seemed very mechanical.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to look at it for the Provorov side of things. I mean, he said the right things in terms of okay, what are you supposed to say to answer questions? Like you're not going to throw teammates under the bus in a bad year. You're going to say, there are certain things to build on, which he did say. Like there's certain steps forward that they did take as a team that he saw that were the right way to kind of like build up. The structure and just how the team was playing in general as a unit, right, versus the previous year. And then even you have Cam York mentioned, Provorov was somebody he looked up to and respected a lot, and he's probably the best defenseman he ever played with. And there's also a tidbit in the interview day where they kind of talked about how Provorov reached out to York when he got sent down and helped him out there, right? So, I mean, there's signs that the guy's a good teammate and can be a good teammate, even though that's kind of been refuted in the past that he isn't that. So I don't think we're in the locker room or in the positions to really know what's going on, right? Like I think the main thing people bring up is he says they when asked about the rebuild and like how he believes the team is going to handle it. Provorov essentially mentions he said they would do the rebuild the proper way, and I believe he will. Right, so I guess the disconnect is like, why mention they if you're going to be here and
Yeah.
around for all of it, which makes a ton of sense. Like personally, for me, like I think a guy saying they in that manner isn't really a big deal. Like he's meaning they as in upper management. Like I think it's 50-50 if I had to guess on like whether Provorov stays or goes, because I see your point, Yariv, where they're using him in a top pair role. They're not really taking minutes away from him. He didn't get benched all season. You hear like these stories of him helping younger guys like York.
They also didn't play anybody in his role as a test.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you hear Tortorella kind of mention that there's no locks on defense and that they were trying that the defense is really where he thinks the team needs to improve and he wants to see younger guys kind of move into roles next season potentially. And he also says, we try to teach accountability for a lot of defensemen and how they're making mistakes, but some players, aren't open to the accountability or don't want to be held accountable. So when you hear stuff like that, just in pertaining to the defense, it kind of makes you wonder like who is he speaking about? Personally, for me, like it's probably more the older guys. So it's either some sort of combination of Provorov, Sanheim, Ristolainen, and like I don't see it being a Sealer, Braun, or York. Actually, throw D'Angelo in there as well, obviously with all the
Yeah.
things that's gone on. So forgot to mention him, but. So it's some of the older defensemen there's some sort of issue with. It seems like just on the D, and maybe there isn't like um, total chemistry in terms of how the coaching staff wants them to play and how they want them to address like making mistakes, stuff like that. So it's interesting in general. I just think it makes it all 50-50. I wouldn't be surprised if Provorov gets moved. I wouldn't be surprised if he's still here. This is literally, I think, a perfect way to kind of encapsulate a wait and see situation because you see a certain side of it saying, well, that points to him being here, but then you see a certain side of him or a side of it saying, well, that points to him, being gone. So I think it really truly is a let's wait and let's see kind of how it
Yeah.
unfolds.
The only players that I can think of that I would at this point that I would be surprised if they got traded would be TK, Hart, Tippett, Cates.
Yeah. And then like any young prospects, I would say.
Lawton, maybe just because of what he did in the locker room this year, but
Yeah.
and Forster.
Yeah, I was gonna mention him, like Forster,
Yeah.
like any other young guys that like are
Well,
itching to look at,
I mean,
maybe. But
I could, but like, okay, I like Bobby Brink. I don't think they're gonna trade him, but like, if they trade
if
him
there's a
and get a,
package where it makes
they,
sense, yeah, they're
I,
gonna move him.
I could see, like, I could see anything at this point. Again, if Provorov is on the table, that means everybody else underneath him
Yeah, well,
is
I
on
think
the table.
just to jump off that, Yariv, I wanted to bring this up.
That means all defensemen outside of Cam York.
Basically, it seems like at least with the defense, it seems like it's wide open because I think Torts mentioned, and we'll get into Torts specifically, but he was kind of stating that the forwards made a lot of progress, but he didn't feel the same with the defense, and that means he wants to see more room for competition there. So,
Isn't he right though?
yeah, I
I
mean,
was
I would.
thinking about it because we're gonna do. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're gonna do our grades, and I was already thinking about it ahead. I was like, I don't
They
think
might have
they're.
the worst grade. Yeah. So, in a sense, if you look at like overall evaluating what's happened, I don't see that he's wrong. He's just being honest about kind of where the team's at and how those defensemen performed. For the value that they're bringing, the contracts, all that type of
Yeah.
stuff, we got to take into account. Just in terms of like Briere, the rebuild, all that kind of stuff. I know Darren Dreger last week mentioned and reported that Briere is willing to get involved in heavy lifting this offseason.
Yeah.
He's essentially interested in listing on basically every asset the Flyers have, which is kind of to our point, right? Like there's only a handful of guys we see that might not be moved. That's just the
It's what's
situation
being
they're in.
reported, right? It's like
Yep.
you
And then,
can't ignore that.
yeah, and then he also mentions Briere understands they won't have a top 10 pick in June, but he wouldn't be surprised if he engages trying to sweeten that a bit and move up in the draft. Briere wants to be aggressive. So that I thought was interesting because, I mean, you're seventh overall, you want to move up. Where does, like, what number makes it an impact or makes it worth it for you to give assets up to move up to? So obviously top
Well,
three.
it
I don't know what it would take to get into there, but the fact that he's
bro,
open to it is
trade. I mean,
interesting.
the only way to do it is to grab one of the teams that are like, let's say Detroit, right? They're
Yeah.
just ready to compete more. Yeah, they would love a top player. I think they would be open to a Provorov for a top pick type of trade. Like
And then
that's
you trade both your picks to move up
that
into the top three.
that would be the idea. But at the same time, couldn't you see the Flyers also being like, well, this is a really deep draft. We'd want. I don't know. It's really tough because like, what are
We
you
want two
trading?
picks. Yeah.
Unless you're, in my opinion, unless you're trading into the top two.
To get Fantilli or
Fant
Bedard. Yeah.
Bedard, nobody's going to ever do
Yeah,
that.
that's what I
Out
mean.
of
No one's
your,
gonna
I was
trade.
even trying to think about it. I was like, I don't know what it would take. It would take an insane amount.
It'd
You
have
have
to
to
be a
offer,
Lindros trade. It'd have to be like how many guys went in the Lindros trade? 15
yeah,
people. Plus you have Peter Forsberg and first
yeah.
round
You'd
picks.
have to
And
throw an immense amount of assets at the team, probably to the point of hurting yourself.
might
No,
not be worth
definitely,
it. Yeah.
definitely. No, I mean, it might still be worth it to be honest with you, how good this kid could be.
No, he's insane. But I just mean in the sense that like from a team building perspective, you give up 15 assets for one guy.
Well, okay. Let's play out the scenario. Uh, let's say the Ducks get him. Or no, let's say Chicago gets the first overall pick. Okay?
Yeah.
They would never do this. Let's just play around with it. Chicago doesn't have a very deep farm system. They have less of a farm system than the Flyers. This is why they are doing what they're doing. Is that they are like, we need to inject a bunch of young players now. We don't have anything. Whatever we have is in the NHL or we traded for recently or whatever. But they're kind of scrounging together a prospect pool. So, like, theoretically, if they're that far away and somebody like Connor Bedard is there, would be like, okay, well, as the Flyers, we offer you our first round pick for the next 4 years, right? Like, that team needs to know that every single year for the next 4 years, they have another chance, an extra chance.
Plus, you're probably giving them like fucking Carter Hart, Ivan Provorov, a number of players, Tyson Forster, like basically anybody of value you're trading in that trade.
Yeah, so, you'd have to move like a Forster as well, plus the 4 first round picks. Plus another great roster player, right? Yeah. Probably plus Morgan Frost or whatever. I don't know.
Or Tippett. Like you're moving somebody.
I don't know, but you'd have to throw all of your best assets at the deal.
In that team situation who's picking number one, they have every right to ask for that because look at the type of player they're gonna pick. So like
because in the back of your mind, you're like, I might actually do that.
That's why I think it's so out of the realm of possibility, just because like
it's not
no team's going to think of it's not worth it, and then also no team's going to be like, well, I'm trading this guy.
Well, the only reason the trade Lindros or the Lindros trade was ever
it's because he didn't want to play for Quebec.
Exactly.
I don't think that situation's here. Basically,
that's what I was saying about Provorov. I was like, the only reason Provorov would be leaving is because he doesn't want to be here. Which to some degree, maybe that is the case. I mean, you did have an outburst with the media last year. We saw that stuff with Jake Voracek. He was also ready to move on. So, again, I don't want to move guys. I don't want to do that stuff. But my attitude, regardless of what happened, is just get the value that we need. At least don't get me goddamn bare minimum nonsense. Get me real goddamn value. Give me something to get excited about. And we can make any trade work.
Yeah. I mean, if you can move Provorov and that propels you to getting another top 10 pick in this draft somehow, and then you can use that to parlay into something else.
Carter Hart might get you. Nah, I don't know. Goalies are everything's
either way. Like I don't know if that's
what into this I don't know.
Top that's what I'm saying.
So crazy.
It's going to be tough though. So like if that's
what if Michikov is 5?
He might be. I mean, this whole Russian situation, just what happened with his father. Rest in peace, right? But
yeah.
It's a terrible thing that happened there. But I don't know. The Michikov stuff's interesting. I fully think that he's should be number 2. So for him to drop to 6 or 7, I think a team's getting a real.
I hear people diminishing his game. By the way, I do. Steve was right, I do hear people saying, "Oh, it's Fantilli's clear." Guys, the what Fantilli is doing is incredibly impressive. What Michikov has done in Russia is more impressive. So,
I
like,
think it just
at
depends for
least
Michkov.
equally.
Yeah, I think it just depends for Michkov, like what team, if you're going to draft him, like what's the exit plan for him?
Yeah,
Like in
that
your organization's mind, like how
uh,
are you getting him out of there, right?
agreed. But he still should be considered in that crop because
Oh, 100%.
talent is
Yeah.
talent. You know what I mean? Eventually, he will get out. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he will get out and he will be playing here, and he's gonna
Just
be
think
on
about
more teams.
Kaprizov his first season, right? He was 24, 25, and look how good he was. So, like, even if
Yeah,
it's that situation and you
and
have to wait a bit, it'll be worth the
and you won't
wait.
have to wait till 24, 25, Mitch Cobb. You'll wait till he's like 21
Yeah.
in the perfect age to come into the NHL, quite frankly. All right. Well, so we're talking about actually I do want to say one more thing about the Provorov thing. This is not to fight or to argue with people on Provorov. I'm not going to. But the one thing that frustrates the hell out of me is that everybody keeps saying the exact same thing about him is that he had one good season with Niskanen and that he needs this guy. Yeah, he had his best season actually with Shane Gostisbehere, the defensive stalwart Shane Gostisbehere. This guy has had three fantastic NHL seasons. And that season with Shane Gostisbehere, him and Ghost were considered one of the best pairings in the NHL under Dave Haxtell. I did not forget this. It's really easy to diminish his whole career into one good season, and it's not real. I agree he didn't have his best season this year. He won Defenseman of the Year by default because nobody played that well on defense this year, quite frankly, and he has the toughest role. I get that. But to diminish all of his career to one good season with Niskanen is just not true. And it makes the arguments that you do make less valid because it seems like you're trying to position your argument to seem like you're always being right about something. You have to give the player, regardless of where he is, full credit for what he did right and what he didn't do right. And the reality is, it's not one great season from Provorov. It was three in a young season, and now it's stagnated at a very frustrating point in this career, in this entire team's career. Sorry, I just want to get that out because I feel like I'm always hearing that on every podcast.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, like I said, it's never going to be a linear thing, right, with young players. So he's had some ups, he's had some downs. Personally, I think he's a really good player. I mean, if the Flyers move on from him, they move on from him. I just hope, like I said,
We'll be ready for it.
I just hope they get the right value, right?
Hey, look,
Obviously, so.
look, we didn't want to see Giroux go.
But it
Everybody
turns
hated.
out that it's been a good trade so far. So
Nobody's complaining watching
yeah,
Tippett play. We got another first round pick next year. At the very least, like, let's go. Like, if this team is transitioning into another phase, I'm ready to do whatever. It just better be smart. And I do notice that in the way that people talk about the moves we make. They're like under this like Chuck Fletcher umbrella of ability, and again, like I think Chuck Fletcher sucked at trades. Like, in my opinion, he sucked at them. So, like, that's not how I see potential moves can be made. Um, I and what you said about Danny being aggressive, like, didn't we say that immediately? That's his playing
well, that's
style.
kind of what you need though for where the
That's
team's at, right?
well, that's
So
him on the ice,
yeah, well, he's always an aggressive player, always going to the
unassuming
hard areas. So
and highly aggressive.
hopefully, he does the same with kind of the way he approaches tackling what he needs to do this offseason,
Yeah,
right? Make the hard trades and the hard decisions you need to do, but are necessary, and then you evaluate from there, basically.
yeah, and he's gonna start off by tampering with the fantasy or with the oddball machine thing that they have, and the Flyers are gonna get the first overall pick.
That's what we're hoping
Savvy
for.
move, Brer. I like it. Thinking ahead. All right, next topic we have is Kevin Hayes. And the Kevin Hayes interview for me, I mean, we just talked about the main takeaway. It just, when they ask him, he pretty much is saying, hey, management and I are apart. You can see like I'm not being used. I don't think I'm in their plans. And, I do agree with the sentiment that's been going around. It felt like he already knew something was in the works. And it does feel like he will not be here. Probably pretty soon. Maybe at the draft, right? Like he might get traded at the draft for a second round pick or something like that in 2023.
Yeah,
What do you
I
think?
mean, I think with Hayes, the writing's been on the wall for a little bit, to be honest. I think since he's been benched that second time, he hasn't really looked the same, and the team hasn't really been using him the same. If you look at him on the ice, like I feel like it's almost been a tale of two seasons. It's kind of been like you see two different players. I feel like the start of the year is really motivated, like really engaged. He's playing the best he ever played. Obviously, could be a hot streak, stuff like that. But I think like as soon as things started to deteriorate a little bit, just in terms of like what's happening in his usage, him and the coach, you just see like a lack of enthusiasm from him on the ice. He doesn't seem as motivated.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a decision into why they might be looking to trade him. Right? They tried to get more out of him by doing that, and it doesn't seem to have worked. It kind of seems like it almost backfired with him and them doing that. But I also think that's the main point of this and why Tortorella did it. Right? He wants to see how guys react to this, and it gives him more of an insight into why he does need to be moved now versus kept, right? I think one thing that was asked is Hayes said that he believes the Flyers have already made their decision in terms of the fate, and that he'll likely find out around the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing too that was mentioned just with Hayes is that he mentioned after the All Star break he got benched. So this is the exact quote: "I was an All Star earlier in the year. The second half of the year, I don't think I was given the same opportunity, and it is what it is." So you could tell there's just a lack, I guess, and a lack of not communication, but a bit of a divide, obviously between him and the coaching staff and management. I just think the player realizes that they're trying to go younger and kind of this is a writing on the wall for me, and it looks like there really isn't a role for me any longer on the team, and that's kind of I think what he's accepting. And Briere in his presser kind of goes on the opposite route and says, "Well, we don't know what we're gonna do. Any team in the league would love to have a 6'5" player like Hayes and all that stuff." And of course, he's gonna say that because he wants to sell other teams on
Of
Hayes,
course.
and so if he's gonna pump up his own player, I mean, he's saying we'll see what happens in the summer. I agree. I think there's deals to be made and there's deals to be had for Hayes if the Flyers do want to move him, and I do think that's probably what they're looking to do, just based on
Yeah.
all the smoke surrounding it, and just everything surrounding what Hayes has been saying lately, and just his demeanor, his play on the ice. It kind of all points to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's also the consideration nobody's brought up that he might be swapped for another player.
That could
Like
happen too. Yeah,
like, hey, he's unhappy here and he's unhappy.
let's
Let's
see what
switch up.
happens.
They
Yeah,
have they have a similar contract or whatever. Any of those situations are possible. But I'll be honest with you. I've said this. If you guys have been listening for a while, I've said this for a while. I would have traded Kevin Hayes a while ago. I've been open to trading Kevin Hayes for some time, and even prior to him playing poorly. I even when he was playing better, I always loved like on paper what he was, but I never looked at Kevin Hayes on this team as like one of the leaders of the team. Even when he was playing his best hockey, always saw like he was like secondary
he
guy.
wasn't the main catalyst that you need if you're going to win. Essentially, is
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying, or one
and
of
I
the main ones.
well, I think he can be. Like I do think he has abilities. But I never sensed that from him that he had that role here. I think he can still have that role for a team.
I just don't think it
Um,
was like you were saying. I don't think it was defined here in that way.
yeah, I don't think I think we had guys. Obviously, we had Couturier and G when he showed up.
And
You know what I mean?
Voracek, yeah.
Yeah, we had
Those are
Voracek.
kind of the guys taking that role. Then now it's the young guys have kind of superseded him in that role as well. So
Yes, they like leapfrogged him.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And quite frankly, like if you look at the end of the season, we can say whatever we want about Hayes, but like Morgan Frost was out playing Hayes.
100%. So why wouldn't you play a younger guy who's taking a bigger bite, right? And showing that he kind of has more of a drive, at least at that point in the season, anyway.
Well, that's how you want your young guys to do it. You want them to literally take the jobs from veterans, and that's what Tortorella was hinting at. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, I feel like it's better for Hayes to move on from here. I feel like he'll be happier on another team, quite frankly. And hopefully he gets to stay on the East Coast and that it is Columbus. I was thinking about the Columbus situation. I mean, I could totally see it. They want to be competitive. They brought in Goudreau.
Them, Carolina, maybe Boston. I think these are the teams. Colorado too.
The only thing is, it's got to be somebody who could take his cap hit.
Well, I
And
just think with Boston, I don't know like what's going to happen if they're going to win the cup or anything. But let's say hypothetically they win the cup. Who knows? Obviously, it's too early. But if they do, and you have Boston or
Krejci might retire.
yeah, you have Krejci or Bergeron retire, then you put Hayes in there, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, and they would get more out of him. Let's be
Mhm.
honest. Um, yeah. So okay. Um, let's do the let's do the let's go to Briere actually. Let's go straight into Briere at this point. So Briere had a lot of stuff going on, and we could bring up the player interviews because some of it is like coming and going as we talk. So Briere had, in my opinion, kind of the more interesting interview. First topic I'll just bring up that came to mind for me. Said he's not making any changes for the scouting. We know that it's a big thing coming up. He's asked the question if he wants to add anybody. He pretty much shot that down. He's like, no, I like who we have. I think we've done a good job. Didn't come in, try to rock the boat, didn't try to bring anybody last minute to confuse people. I think it's a good move. I'll be honest, even if you do want to bring people in, I don't think it's really the time to do it. You'd have to get that person caught up and in the mix, and all of a sudden, I mean, I think we shouldn't assume that everything is broken just because Chuck Fletcher's out of here. I mean, I don't think, and Vasili, you've said this over and over again, the drafting has been pretty good. So I don't think it's anything panic. I think it was just good to hear that.
Yeah, I think the same thing with the scouting. Like personally for me, like I've liked what the staff has done in the last couple of drafts. So
Mhm.
I think that was a big thing for him to bring up, obviously,
Yep.
just because there has been criticism of the scouts and the Flyers drafting. Whereas I mean, every team's going to have misses in these situations, but if you look at it, like past couple of seasons, actually, the Flyers have been getting guys in the later rounds that have been turning into or looking like they're going to turn to NHL players. So, I mean, that's pretty much more than you can ask for, right? If you're having a later round pick make it to that level, like a Desnoyers, like a Andre, like some of the guys they've been kind of seeing come in and play well with the Phantoms. Um, Another thing I thought that was interesting, just from Briere's perspective, is he said he didn't want to block the youth, right? And he
Yep.
said he really wants to figure out what they have in the system, and there's no like concrete timeline on everything or what's really happening. So I think it's just vague in the sense of like what's on the horizon, because he obviously wants to give the young players, and the organization wants to give the young players a chance. So like it speaks to your point that there's not going to be a lot of room to bring in free agents. I don't think, and I don't think we should. That's something we should expect, unless there's obviously like somebody dying to come here and it's a great deal for the team, or if there's some sort of trade that makes the most sense. I feel like they're going to give a lot of young guys opportunities, and when you have Couturier and Atkinson both coming back, you're technically adding two older veterans to the mix of a young team. So I
Yeah.
think they kind of need to be wary of that as well. Like you don't want to sign a couple extra veterans, and then oh wait, like now all our young guys aren't
Yep.
going to get a chance to crack the NHL lineup. Another thing too is he was happy, how things went with Torts. So I think he's spot on there, just because Tortorella is kind of at least cemented and put a foundation in place where the young guys are trending in a right direction, and where the Flyers are. That was the most important thing. If you look at last season, right? Well, what was all our question marks is how are the young guys going to play? How are they going to adapt to Tortorella? How are they going to evolve under his structure? I'd say for the most part, pretty much majority of the young players have taken a step forward versus a step back.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think that's obviously a main thing out of his presser. And I think the other main thing is the Jay O'Brien not getting signed. Like he confirms that, and he states that we're not
They don't
aware
know.
yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
on the 2023 pick or 2024 pick. So I'm interested on that. Like I wonder when they're going to confirm
I
on
I
that
think
pick. But
well, I think it also depends on what Jay O'Brien does, and
isn't it
if
like if he becomes a free agent?
he has to file for free
Yeah, he
agency before
becomes
June.
before July 1st. Then they get the
I
pick.
think it's actually in June, but maybe I'm wrong. The deadline, I think.
Okay, the deadline. Yeah. Okay, makes
I
sense.
think
Because I
it's
know
in June.
before he's set to become one August 15th or something along those lines. If he doesn't, right?
Yes.
Which would make sense why it defaults to the next
Yeah,
year.
and look, he doesn't have to help the Flyers out. It would help us out, and I don't
Who
know.
knows? He might want to sign somewhere too, so it could be beneficial to
Yeah.
him, right?
I love how we're already like next year's draft has no value perception wise for people. Like
I
we have
know.
2 first-round picks next year. We're gonna be getting our second-round pick back, most likely. Right? We're like it's actually kind of gearing up for a huge draft for the Flyers because if they're a bad team next year again, like if they do move out a bunch of vets and there are a bunch of youth guys in here,
Yeah.
they're gonna be at the bottom of the
And
league again.
there's
That'll
no
be
guarantee as to what Florida's going to do just because they're in the playoffs this year. They might be bad next year.
they could
So
be middle of the road next year, and the Flyers get a top 15 pick out of it because that pick's top 10 protected, but not top 15.
yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting year, and so the topic of moving up in the draft was brought up as well. And look, you mentioned it earlier. Briere said he's going to be aggressive. There's rumors he's going to be aggressive again. If you look at the way he played on the ice, he's going to be aggressive.
I don't think that's something we should need to be too like concerned
100%.
about. Yeah.
He's gonna be sneakily aggressive. And by the way, I'll be honest with you. I think he is considerably more savvy than Fletcher. I'll also tell you that I think he's giving you guys, the fans, I mean, and not specifically our audience, all of us, lip service. I think he's telling us exactly what we want to hear, not exactly what's going to happen.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, because he watched what Fletcher did and watched how he kept giving all, like, the reason you don't say a timeline or anything is because next year, if the expectations are nothing, you don't fall short of the
Yeah.
expectations.
Well, why set yourself up? Why set?
Yeah.
That's the thing that Fletcher was kind of doing in a sense. He was setting himself up for failure. He's setting deadlines, timelines of when they're going
Yeah.
to be competitive, not meeting them, and then you as a fan are thinking, "Well, he set this timeline, he set this deadline. Fuck him!" Like basically,
Yeah.
why didn't he do anything,
Yeah.
or why didn't he get us into contention? Right?
Telling people that they were going to have an aggressive retool, regardless of his intent, was a mistake because you were revealing what you're doing, first of all,
Well, yeah, to other teams as well.
to other teams, and you should be negotiating from a
Well,
position of power,
I've said this
and
all the
that
time.
shows you have none.
Sorry to cut
Go
you
ahead,
off,
please.
but I've said this that I mean, personally, I don't listen to what GMs say in press conferences
The
because
actions.
it's all lip service. Like they're never going to outline exactly what they're going to do. They might give a general idea. Well, we're looking to get the young guys in. There's no timeline, and that's kind of what Breer's doing, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Fletcher, I mean, he gave more of a concrete outline of what he was doing, and it kind of backfired on him in the sense that he wasn't able
Yes.
to do anything. Whereas, like you're saying, Breer's kind of covering his tracks in the
He's
sense
under
that
promising.
yeah, which I understand from his perspective because there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of young players on the team. He even said himself, there's no guarantee they're going to take a step forward. How many times have you seen a young player of a sophomore slump or take a step back, right, and
Great
it
point.
not be linear? So I just think he doesn't want to make a lot of promises because there's a lot of uncertainty.
And if
So
they're
why do
good,
that, right?
everybody goes, "Oh my God, look the little he's done already." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
So it goes both ways to both
yeah.
polar opposites.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a position that he's playing smart, in my opinion, because he doesn't have pressure on him to turn it around next year and all that. So play the long game, and you can see that. You can see
What
that. So
he did mention though that I thought was interesting is he
go
said
ahead, please.
that the rebuild doesn't mean fire sale, and he up on that. Like he said that
Yeah.
again. So I think in terms of there's a reason
Well,
why he's not just saying it at the trade deadline and then he's saying it again. I think it's because you hear a lot of rumors of a lot of young guys' names out there, like a Hart, for example, or like a Konechny, and I think him saying something like that is a little indication that hey, unless we get blown away for offers for these guys where it doesn't make sense that we
yeah.
wouldn't accept, we're not going to be moving them. So like, don't expect it, right?
Telling the entire league that every player on your team is available is stupid, by the way. I know that that's going around as a rumor. I'm not saying it's wrong. Again, I'm not questioning sources. I don't care. I don't have sources. You have sources. Fine. Not a problem for me. But if you want to go out and tell everybody what you're doing, that's really stupid because they should have no idea what you actually need, only what you're willing to part with. That's it. And if you're willing to part with everything, then you obviously don't value anything that much on your team. So I don't need to work that hard to get anything off of there because it's all open season. You're going to give me, you're trying to get rid of them.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. That's the
and
mindset,
again,
right?
look at the position we were thrown into when we did all that. Look at the Shane Gosper trade, where if you look at the opposite of that, what Joe Sakic did with Matt Duchene, where he got way too much for Duchene for just being like, we're no rush. I know that. I remember he was criticized the entire time. Oh my God, you got to pull the trigger now. Oh my God. And some cases that's right. But when you actually have leverage, power, and retain the contracts, you don't. And your power is in the lack of action. And that's the only thing is I'll say is like, I really hope that they're not running around saying everybody's available. It'd be like Carter Hart is absolutely not available. So that means if a team wants Carter
You
Hart,
gotta overpay, yeah.
be like, yeah, we would trade him if you would overpay for him, but I wouldn't say he's available, right? Like that should be the attitude. Is like, look, they're not
Well,
available.
you want to have a negotiator's mentality. You don't want to just
Yeah,
say, "Hey, we're
you
giving up everything," right?
if you want to tell everybody, hey, I'm open to conversations,
That's a
that's a very
totally
different.
different
Yes,
story. Yeah.
we're open to all kinds of deals. That's a different story than saying everybody's available. So a fire sale is like throw your hand up. We're getting rid of everybody in
That's kind
Chicago.
of why I think he mentions it because I think that there's a perception that that's what's going to happen just with the word rebuild, but I don't think that's exactly what's going on, right?
Look, I'll be honest, and I listen to Chris Terrian a lot. I like him. I like him a lot, actually. I respect the shit out of him because I mean, I grew up watching him, and I hear him talk about like he thinks there's like nothing here. You know what I mean? Like there's like not like there's nothing to cling on to at all. Like you need to dump as much as you can, reset, go long, rebuild. Like he's certain in that. I don't see that. I see that as that is an option. You can do that, but I don't see that type of situation here. I see, okay, well, there's some stuff here. There's some stuff to remove. Maybe I'm ignorant and I don't know, but I've just seen better trades than what Fletcher has done. I'm like, I just don't see an impossible situation here. I see areas of promise. And, speaking of areas of promise, let's get into the Konechny thing because you were just talking about it, right? Um, Konechny, I mean, Briere talked about him specifically. He reveled in his game that, the guy's on a 40-goal pace this year, right? And he was talking about how they had Voracek and Giroux, and he's like, it's really exciting to see the next wave of guys, that are gonna
Step up,
do
yeah.
that. And like, look, maybe he still trades TK, but again, like if you're looking at your pieces on a board, you're not looking at like, oh, well, like this guy's got to be the first to go because I can get a first round pick for him. It's like like I get it, but like what kind of pick, what kind of arm and a leg? Well, what are we talking about here? How long? Like at what point do we not have any assets and we just have picks? And that sounds good, but it also leaves you at the bottom of the league for years until hopefully that crop, develops the way you want, where you have a sure thing here in a guy who's already a top line player in the NHL. So like like I just see it as like you need to build on your strengths and and cover up your weaknesses. And the one thing that he did say on top of that is that the depth at right wing on this team, and we said it a while ago. I mean, you include Atkinson in that. It's
There's a
almost
lot.
it's almost too strong. I mean, Forrester is not going to play on your fourth line. You know what I
Well,
mean?
you wouldn't want that as an org anyway if that was the case, right? Like,
Yeah. So there might be shift, and we don't know what's going on with Atkinson at this point. But I mean, he reveled in the fact that his right wing is pretty set. Maybe there's an opportunity there to move an asset, potentially. But I don't know. I just don't see TK and Tippett being on the top of that list.
yeah, I think for connecting, I mean, Briere kind of goes into it, and I mean, hit the nail on the head with what he says, right? Like, that's exactly what you want to see from a guy who's his age, where some of the older veterans get moved on from, and he steps up and shows that, hey, like, I can take on what they kind of, or I can take on the role that now needs to be filled with them departing, right? So I think that shows just the leadership within his game in general because he steps up when needed in
Yeah.
that situation because you can't deny that, hey, I mean, he stepped up into a role where there weren't many other top line guys on the team. He probably was the only bona fide top line guy that they had all year, right? So
Yeah.
that's a big thing to see. Also, the fact that, I mean, he's, like you're saying, scoring almost 40 goals. He would have got 40 goals if he would have played a full season. So I think just, Briere kind of pointing to the fact that, um, they're not going to go for a full fire sale, full trade everybody type thing. Kind of states Konechny safe. Also, just if you look at Konechny's interview in general, I thought some interesting tidbits was just him saying, playing with Cates and how much Cates reminded him of Couturier at such a young age. So I
Yeah,
thought that was an interesting tidbit as well that Konechny
we
brought
should dig
up.
into that. But go ahead.
Yeah, so he brought that up and just was basically saying like he played with Cates most of the year, and you just see some crazy things that he does on the ice for just a rookie and the details that he kind of pays attention to. So I think just Konechny mentioning that kind of just shows like promise in the young guys in Cates in
I
general, but
think
it's also
I
how
think
he's kind of grown as a leader, right? Because
mm,
he's pumping up the tires of one of his teammates and one of the rookies who had a really good season. So that just shows like an extra level, I think, from Konechny. And I think there was a lot of that in his interview in general, just kind of commenting on other players' games and how kind of playing with them helped him out this season, but also playing in different areas on the ice. Like he mentioned himself, right? Like he was a lot more aggressive this year. He was a lot more willing to get to the front of the net. And I think personally for him to be successful, that's what he really needs to do, right? Is get to the front of the net. So
totally. And I loved what he said about Noah Cates. And I think there were some analytics that came out about Cates that he's in like the 99th percentile he's in like the 1% of defensive forwards in the NHL
yeah, he's doing really well. Like I saw a lot of stuff on social
analytically.
media. I don't have the exact stuff in front of me, but Jay Fresh does a lot of analytic like player cards, and I think he's like his
I
defensive
think,
score on that analytic card is a 99.
yeah, that's what it
He's
is.
like
Yeah.
he's
So
like
he's in the
ninth
1%.
to I think, and like there was some pre-Selke voting poll I saw, and he got like voted in like ninth for the Selke, which is kind of
That's
crazy considering
crazy. I think
his
he's going to
rookie
get
year.
more rookie of the year votes than we expect. I don't think he's going to come close to one, but I think he's going to be named. I think they get to pick five, right?
I think he could
He'll be,
crack top five
yeah, I
this
think he'll
year.
be in that top five. I think he will get recognized for being one of the better rookies this year. I mean, he is absolutely phenomenal defensively, and I think his offensive game is still going to build on top of what he had a 40-point year essentially this year. I
Pretty
definitely
good.
think he
And
can
the
get a
usage
six.
that he got, though, you got to think about
Yeah,
he's playing against top lines,
and if
right?
he's on
So
the wing, I mean, he is potentially a 60-point player. Like that is a really goddamn good
he
middle
was
six
really
forward.
useful defensively too, is what people,
Yeah, that's. I mean, no shot to Scott Lawton, but that's a better Scott Lawton than when we
Yeah,
drafted Scott Lawton.
100%.
Lawtz is a guy that like I think people would be surprised that he got traded, but he is an asset that is older, that is tradable, that is not going to be here when we win a cup, probably. You know what I mean? Or he'll be above 30.
I'm interested to
I
see what happens with him. I think for now he's going to stick around for the next couple of years,
think so
but
too, but it,
as they
it's
get closer to
look,
contention,
if we want to, if you there's going to be a lot of change with this team without them making a single trade, just on the fact that guys are going to be leaving.
yeah,
There's already a few transitions there. But if you really are talking about transitioning this team to be younger, like you are targeting the guys who are around 30. You can't move Atkinson. You can't move Couturier. Plus, you probably wouldn't want to move Couturier anyway because he's your best player. But you can't move Atkinson and Couturier because of the injury issues. You have Hayes you can move. You have Risto you can move. You have Lawton you can move. You know what I mean? Like I'm listing out the guys who are near 30. Nick Sealer. Like these are guys who I'm not saying they're gonna move them. Like I agree with your statement, but if you really want to get younger, you can get a first round pick for Scott Lawton. We were offered, I think, a first and a second for him a couple years ago. The Flyers didn't jump on it. There's value in Lawton. There's value in some of these guys to get traded. I just don't know. I mean, I'm very curious to see. And I really like the way that Daniel Briere is like, I'm going to be really aggressive, but don't expect a fire sale. And I like that because I don't like fire sales. Um, anything else you want to add about Briere, like Briere's portion?
not much. I think we got into it quite a bit. Did you want to get into Torts
Yeah,
next?
let's get into Tortorella. And the first thing I want to start on, I guess we can kind of mix Atkinson into this
Yeah,
specific
sure.
one. So Atkinson was really revealing during his he probably had the most interesting exit interview just because he finally kind of told the story of what happened. I think he was overly revealing, to be honest with you, probably
Yeah,
beyond the
yeah.
comfort zone of the Flyers, just kind of telling that he was misdiagnosed. We heard a lot of stuff about the medical issue. We didn't really know, but obviously things were clearly worse than we thought to some degree here prior over the past several years. I don't know exactly. I don't have inside source. I do not know. I'm following along like you guys are. But he seemed very frustrated. Finally, he's allowed to get contact. So, it is definitely nerve-wracking. And then you saw and then switch to Tortorella. You saw Tortorella kind of bring that up, how he wishes that he didn't say all that and then try to give medical unit, said that they're, making strides and everything. But I thought that was really interesting. What'd you think about all that?
Yeah. So I mean, with the Atkins and stuff, it's just crazy that the misdiagnosis that he had kind of led to a season long basically bout with an injury where if you get, let's say, the correct diagnosis the first time, maybe he's actually back and you get to see him in some games, right? So like that speaks to how important it is to ensure that the medical staff that you're running with is, competent, able to help your players in the way that is needed. Not to say that that's not what the Flyers were doing, but obviously at first it wasn't the greatest. So what really happened and what the injury was is he got diagnosed with a herniated disc at the end of things um and got surgery there. I don't think he went with the artificial disc like Joel Farabee did in Jack Eichel. He went with a different thing where I believe they take some nerve endings from somewhere else on the body and then add it in to the disc or something along those lines. I'm not a doctor, so don't quote
Poor
me, but that's what I
bastard.
remember. That's what I remember him saying.
Yeah, poor guy,
Um,
man.
yeah, poor guy. It's definitely tough, but he was very emotional, right? Like he was almost crying at one
Almost lost
point.
feelings in his arm, he said.
Yeah, so this is what he said. This is the exact quote. I was told at one point that if I didn't take care of the muscle atrophy in my left tricep, I may never play again. 3 days later, he had surgery on a herniated disc. So that just shows, like, for a player, how tough is that where, you have a diagnosis saying, oh, well, this left muscle atrophy in my tricep needs to be worked on, but then you actually figure out it's a herniated disc causing that issue in your left tendon there and the muscle atrophy, which makes sense, right? Because the disc is obviously connected to all the nerve endings in the arm, stuff like that. But it's just crazy as a player because you're thinking, well, this feels wrong here, so that diagnosis makes sense. But in the end, it's actually the
You know what?
back causing everything.
You know what
So
this reminds me of? Actually, now we're
what?
talking about it, dude. It reminds me of Simone Gagne's injury years ago. Remember,
Yeah, yeah,
remember
a
he
little
had
bit.
the neck injury, and they kept
Hmm.
thinking it was his neck, and then they found out it was actually in his lower back that was
Which makes
causing the
sense,
issue.
though. Yeah, I mean, I get in terms of diagnosis, it makes sense because the back and the nerve endings. I
Supports
mean,
everything. Yeah,
yeah, it supports everything. But as a player, you're probably thinking like, I hear one thing and I hear back surgery, and that kind of scares me. And I hear
yeah,
somebody else being, well, it's really just your arm. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of
yeah.
tough situation for
Hope
him. And
Well, hopefully it's all resolved now. I mean, it seems like there was a look, no matter what, it seems like a lot of people were working on him. I don't think anybody, and I think this is what Tortorella was trying to get away. It's like, hey, look, it's not easy to do what they're doing. They're all trying to diagnose. You have how many doctors try to help this guy? That is kind of medicine, unfortunately. It's not as accurate as we love it to be, because it's humans, doing the diagnoses and all that. But I'm just glad that they threw all the support, that they gave him all the time. And for his sake, I think it's really good they didn't rush him. That they are taking really long time to medically clear him. I just don't think we want another situation like we've had in the past where you see guys come back and then leave immediately, right? They come back, they're there for like 3 games, and then boop, they're out, and then they're out indefinitely. And something happened in the background, right? Misdiagnosis, an issue with the surgery, and it's something. I don't want to see that for him in general, even if he doesn't play here, regardless. So I thought that was an interesting thing for Tortorella to open on too. So the other thing that Tortorella talked about, which was, I think, a lot of people are pointing to Ivan Provorov about this immediately, but he mentioned players that don't want to be here. That needs to be addressed too, right? And how he's kind of identified some people who are not going to want to buy in. Now we're guessing. I don't think we really know everybody, at least not from the outside. We obviously have heard the people close to the team have said certain things about Provorov. Obviously D'Angelo's been public, facing to some degree whatever is happening.
yeah,
Hayes, we're well aware of that. I think, to be honest with you, I think the ones that, like, we probably don't really know the extent of this, and some of the public stuff assumption we're making might be inaccurate. But you can tell he's ready to build his team. So I worry about stuff. I'll be honest with you. That's my only thing that I've heard out of Tortorella that, like, I don't love is I hate the addition by subtraction concept. And he hasn't necessarily said addition by subtraction, but he did say, hey, removing is part of the process before we can add. I understand what he's talking about, right? Like, let's find our group and then we find individuals to add to that group. So once our culture is sound internally, we can add guys and then they'll buy into our culture as opposed to influence our culture. And I totally get that, but it does make me a little bit worried because people go like, just like players, they go through ups and downs. Like, I wonder if, and I just thought of this like earlier today, Provorov ending of his last season was with criticism and him, having a thing with the media. This year, it ended with a lot of professionalism and him being named by the media as the team's best defenseman. It's not the same as last year. And I wonder, even somebody like him would be like, well, all right, well, maybe there's more people here to support me than I think there are. Right. Like
Yeah,
maybe it's less against me than I believe it is if they can still name me as best defenseman because it's media voted. It's not,
yeah, no, I definitely hear that. I think with Tortorella and the subtraction stuff, I think it's more just about kind of identifying who he thinks doesn't fit in just the plans of the team and just like where they're at. Like I think the quote that he has is, "I'm not going to give you the number, but I think there are people for the organization to move forward." I wouldn't say a lot. There are people that I think need to move on because of where we're at in the process. If we're in a different situation with this team, maybe some of those guys stay, but that's not where we're at. That's going to be in discussion with both the Dans. I met with both Dans, and these are discussions that we're beginning to have. So obviously, there's guys that he believes that are going to need to be subtracted. I'm sure there's probably guys that maybe the management doesn't agree. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. I thought the interesting or most interesting part of his press conference was just about the believer kind of aspect. He said, "Well, yeah, I want believers here, right?" And that kind of goes back to your point of saying there's guys that might not want to be here that the team wants to keep. And I think that's kind of gets into the Provorov thing where he said, it doesn't really matter who it is and if he wants to keep them. He said if a guy truly doesn't really want to be here, he wants guys that believe in the process
right.
and where we're going. So
Yeah.
I think from a coaching perspective, I get that because how hard is it to get guys to buy in the
It's all about
NHL?
that.
Right in this day and age, and if you have even one top guy in the team who doesn't really buy, doesn't seem like he wants to be here, it could kind of negatively affect the rest of the group. So, from his perspective, and trying to kind of just build a culture and get everybody on the same page, and in the past where the team has not been on the same page, I think that's why it makes sense for him to kind of address it that way that he did, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it was well stated. I think it's better that all this stuff is out there, and I do think we got to clean this up. I'm so sick about hearing this stuff. I'll
Yeah,
be honest with you guys, like players not want to be here, that is a failure on the organization, in my opinion.
yeah, and
And I'm tired of it.
I have a couple other tidbits too, just from Torts' press conference that I thought was interesting. I think he said that the team just has a ways to go in general in terms of like coaching and being able to
For sure.
grasp like what them and the coaching staff wants. And he said, and what I thought was pretty funny, is just everybody's so sensitive here just about my
Hmm.
coaching in
Yeah.
general. And I thought, he has a point in the sense that
100%.
even though it's tough love and it's a different style, some players receive it better than others, some don't. And like one example is Morgan Frost, right? In his interview, he said that he got benched in Toronto in his hometown. That did wonders for him, and that motivated him. So that kind of shows that like there's certain things he's doing, obviously
100%.
Tortorella, where the
Certain
players and young guys are getting motivated. And he did also mention, he held a lot of players accountable, and he said I think defining accountability with players is still
and
a place that they kind of need to go to, where he said a lot of players still don't know what it is like to be held accountable,
yeah.
what really even accountability is. So I thought that was kind of interesting because that must mean that like as a coach, he's trying to employ something or really trying to hammer something down. And no matter what, somebody isn't listening or there's some lack of consistency with whatever he's trying to teach. So I thought that was a very interesting thing.
Maybe somebody dishing out criticism where they themselves are flawed. Like I think maybe that's
Yeah,
what's going on with D'Angelo, is that maybe he was riding people like hard.
because he's very competitive himself.
Yeah.
He mentioned as well, right? Like Tony didn't play the last 5 games. Something happened. We're gonna keep that between me and him.
I think I think
Um,
Tony might have lost his shit.
I think so too. Did you want to get into D'Angelo? Because I
Yeah,
actually
go
had
ahead.
that
Go
on
ahead.
here.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So for D'Angelo, obviously he scratched the last 5 games. There's a lot of quotes that he kind of got into. So here's one that I want to bring up. So basically, he was asked if he agreed with what happened. He said absolutely not. That's one thing, but he's also the coach of the team. It's my job. It's not my job to decide that all. All I can worry about is being a good teammate, which I did. I try to stay out of the way. I don't want to be a distraction to anybody. These guys had stuff to play for. There's milestones these guys are trying to get to. Guys are trying to play for contracts next year. I don't know how many guys are due, but all that kind of stuff. I don't want to be a distraction. I know you guys are writing about stories and all this, but it was more about for me what them guys were doing. I was done, wasn't playing, so it made no difference at all. Just trying to be around, be a good teammate, watch the games. He also admitted himself that like at certain times he played well, at certain times he thought that he didn't play very well. He thought he was pretty good with his puck possession, but he also thought that he could have had more points. He thought he was really inconsistent throughout the year, and he was frustrating himself with that inconsistency. Um,
Well,
so I
and
thought for him, like I
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
really expecting him to be that accountable himself. I thought he kind of took credit for a lot of his shortcomings. So I'll give kudos to D'Angelo there. I'm interested to see what happens with him because I think there's a sense that he might be on the way out, but then in the press conference they're saying, well, he's going to be back, and Torch says he expects him to be back despite what happened. So I kind of wonder what's going on with that. Like, what did you think, Yuri?
I don't know.
It's a
It's so
weird
hard.
situation. It's
Well,
very
that's why I sense that he's the one who's being critical, and because I could see him like yelling at other guys and trying to get people up and everything. And at the same time, he's also
not doing well.
not
Yeah,
doing well. And I think like that's maybe
and
caused some
the
problem.
and the coaching
Maybe
staff
again,
might
I'm
not like
completely
that.
guessing.
Yeah, the coaching
Right.
staff might not like that potentially. So
Yeah. Or because again, they say they want the players to hash it out in the locker room. So that means the players were hashing it out, in my
yeah,
opinion, and something went wrong.
it's possible.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Personally, to Tortorella's point, outside of Ristolainen, who improved from the beginning of the year, and I guess you could say Cam York improving to get to the NHL. Only Ristolainen improved his game as the year went on.
Yeah,
Everybody
him
else
and
on
York
D,
really. That's it. Yeah,
and I even say York, I'd say he hit a wall where I wouldn't say he was bad in
he
any
just wasn't
sense.
as good as he
He
was earlier in the year at
he
the end
didn't
of the
get
season.
better. It wasn't like the Tippett situation where by the end of the year, York was like, holy shit. And given its defense, it's different. It takes longer. I'm not limiting but he also didn't do that. Like he didn't take Provorov's spot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I don't know if he's capable of it. I think he is a complimentary top pairing guy. We'll see if he can be a legit, guy who can carry a line. That'd be amazing. Um, but he didn't do that either. And I think that's kind of where Tortorella's challenge came from. And I think it's a challenge to everybody. I personally, D'Angelo falls right under the Kevin Hayes thing. Like I see value in him. I get where he's at. I would move him already. I wouldn't have traded
I
him and brought
I
him.
agree, and the reason why is, I mean, you see Tortorella. That's why I'm surprised that they're kind of saying they expect him to be back. I mean, I just don't think they're obviously not in a press conference not going to say like, oh, we're going to trade this guy away because that kind of plays and gives away your hand. So like, I wouldn't read too much into that. I think what you really read into is Tortorella saying, well, there's no locks on D. We want a lot of young guys challenging for spots. Well, if you want a lot of young guys challenging for spots, there has to be room for them to challenge for these spots. So
Well,
that means somebody has to go,
our
obviously.
power play didn't get worse without him.
And
And
that's where he
he
was
was,
brought. He they had the last power play in the league again this season, and he was
yeah.
brought in to improve the power play. So what improvement did you really get,
Yeah.
right?
And again, it's not that he didn't have value on the power play. He was one of the better power play players, but it didn't move the needle for
No,
this
yeah.
team on the power play. So, same reason with Kevin Hayes, right? Like, I need you to be a big, strong center that plays two-way hockey,
Hmm.
that drives physically on a regular basis. You're not doing that. That's what I needed you to do. I'd be ready to move on. Are there any other? We have Coots written here. I don't have a quote from him, but like, are there any other quotes you want to bring up? Because I know you have a bunch of quotes in front of you. We can go through those, and then we'll get into the Phantoms
Nothing specifically for
or
uh,
anybody. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be
So
Coots.
let me just try and dig it up here. But for Couture, what I thought was the most interesting is him just mentioning that he doesn't expect the team to be in as long as a rebuild as everybody's kind of saying. Also,
Right.
right.
Yeah, he did say
He
that.
so this is what he says.
He's one
I
of
don't
them.
think I'm going to save this organization, but things change quickly in this league. He says the next step is to mold and grow a team. And he said like obviously the Rangers rebuilt quickly. Like when they put that letter out, the next season they're in the playoffs. So I think that's kind of something that we got to remind ourselves of here as well, right? That if you look at it, the Flyers and all their young players, they have taken steps forward. And when you add in a couple of veterans and you have a goalie like Carter Hart, you never know what's really going to happen, how quick it can happen. So I think Couturier is kind of trying to like just set expectations that, hey, like we are in a more of a rebuilding type of phase, but he's seen things turn around quickly in the league, which I can't really disagree with. If you look at the past couple seasons, you've seen a lot of teams that weren't playoff teams turn into playoff teams fairly quickly. He also mentioned that Noah Cates and Tippett's or Noah Kate and Owen Tippett are players that stood out for him when he was just watching games.
Yeah.
And he said that, he hasn't seen such a good shot from a young player in Tippett in years. And that would probably be a guy that he'd be interested in playing with. So I've said that in the past that I thought, it'd be interesting to see Tippett and Couturier together just because he slows down the game and gets the puck kind of in the O zone so efficiently. I wonder how that would help a guy like Tippett, who has a really great shot. If you can kind of hem a team in their end, you kind of can let him loose in the O zone a bit. So
Yeah, that's great point. We always think of him playing with TK, especially on the PK. That'll probably happen. But or I'm sorry, with Coots and TK, that'll probably happen. But yeah, as a top line offensive unit, that I think that makes sense. Where you separate, TK also, and he's driving play on his own.
His own line, yeah, exactly.
Right, and he's playing really good defense, best of his career so far. So he's getting there. It's an interesting idea, and the one thing I take away from that when I hear Coots talk that way, it's like I've been talking about this personally.
He seems excited, yeah.
Well, I love, and I think Joel Farabee is the one that said this. He's like people forget that like Sean Couturier won a Selke trophy, like this,
he's really good, yeah.
But like I feel like Couturier knows he's really good, which I love, by the way. And he's like, guys, if I'm out there, like. Look, that might not be true,
better, yeah.
But like he believes that he can get this team to be a competitive team. That's one that screams captaincy to me.
Yeah,
that's like I'm going to carry this team on my back if I have to take them to the playoffs. We watched Claude Giroux do that a few times. I just think it's undervalued how elite this guy is.
And I just think people haven't seen him play in so long, so it's hard for them to recall a lot of the time is what it is.
I mean, you think about a guy like Anze Kopitar in LA and the impact that guy has.
We'll remove him from that team, and I wonder if they're even in the playoff conversation or the mix at all.
Exactly.
Right? So.
Are they the same team without Anze Kopitar? And again, I'm not saying he is Anze Kopitar. He's not that far
it's similar mold.
Either.
Similar mold, yeah.
Yeah, maybe offensively he's a hair worse than Kopitar, but defensively he's right there with him. He's as good as any offensive forward in the league at defense.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have I always look ahead. Like if you have him playing at that level defensively, and he can stay healthy for you, and you have
299
as well.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you have Cates as well. Then I mean, it just speaks for itself. You got two guys that are really good and can really handle themselves in defensive matchups.
Two of the best defensive centers in the league. Talk about playing to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, like we don't have to be the team that dangles everybody through. We can be a
you have John Tortorella as the coach. Team. I mean, what is his model usually? Being a stingy defensive team, right? So
and look, it rides on Coots coming back. I don't doubt that. But you know what I loved? I love that Atkinson said it too.
Yeah,
he was like, he's like, I'm really good at the PK. I love that he was saying that. He's like, I'm really good at the PK.
Well, he said he was tied in the league for most shorthanded goals with Sebastian Aho, right? Yeah. Just to kind of follow up and pump his own tires. But I don't blame him, right? Because it's a really hard thing to do is score shorthanded goals, and when you're doing it at a level that elite, why wouldn't you want to, just remind people about it? So
can't you tell that like I would bet that in Coots and Atkins' mind, they're like, dude, if we were back in this line, like. We want to get back on this team. We would not be in this position if we were out there. Again, whether you guys agree with him or not, I love that attitude. And again, I still don't believe that they would have been the 7th worst record in the league with them. I think
they would have been a lot closer.
To the bubble.
Like we were saying,
St. Louis.
Like we were kind of saying earlier, I just think when you have a guy like Couturier, who does what he can do defensively, and the amount of 1-goal games they were in. Guarantee they would have won a few more with him in the lineup.
But at the same time, like if we're in a rebuild phase, that's better. It's better that we end up.
Yeah, you don't do that. Yeah,
yeah, the opportunity for Bedard or whatever, a top pick versus middle. That is hell. Being the 14 team or whatever with no young guys and no top picks coming in.
That's not what you want, yeah.
And I would argue the Flyers are not in that. Like if the Flyers were a bubble team and all of a sudden they had Forrester coming in and Brink coming in, this is what you want to see. They're a few assets short of that. We'll see how things line up. All right, you want to get into the Phantoms?
Yeah, sure, let's do it.
Okay, so let's get into the Phantom. Phantoms officially have started their playoff run. Their first game against the Charlotte Checkers was yesterday as we recorded this, which was the Tuesday, the 18th. And the Phantoms walked away from it was a very exciting game where they walked away with a 4-3 win, initially taking up to a 4-1 lead, then kind of cracking in the third. And making it interesting for everybody. But they did hold up nicely. And to be honest with you, I mean, the guy who stole the show was Tyson Forrester with one very sick goal
Beautiful goal.
cutting through the slot. Another just a nice goal prior to that. And then also Cooper Marudi and Adam Brooks also continuing what they were doing in the regular season, having a great game. Overall, I do have some other names to throw out there, but it was a great game to watch and really nice to see the fan. I think it's best of three in the first
Yeah,
round
it
here.
is. It is. So it's best of three. So
Yeah.
basically, the next game's real crucial for them, right? If they win, they're moving on. So
Yes.
they're in a great position to start. Just getting in. I feel like in a best of three, you going up 1-0 puts you in like
It's huge.
the best position possible, obviously, because now
You
basically
only
it's an
need to win one of
elimination game.
two.
It's an elimination game for the other team already, right? So you're already
Hmm.
putting the fire towards them. Obviously, I mean, Forster's kind of stole the show, right? He gets 2 goals.
He looks so good, dude.
He looks really good. I mean, that goal he scored, kind of cutting in through the middle of the slot, sick goal. Just the talent is evident. Just the fact that he gets around those couple guys and then can release so quickly. But I thought that goal looked very similar to the goal he scored in Minnesota, actually. And it was interesting to me because it shows that that's kind of maybe like not his go-to, but it's definitely that pull and shoot wrister there. That's definitely
Yeah.
something that he uses a lot, and I think
Mhm.
that's a move that you see a lot of really like talented goal scorers. You see Austin Matthews do that a lot, and you see like a Matthew Kachuk do that at certain points. So I think that's just something that is a move that talented guys are using, and it's an easy way to fool the goalie because it looks like when there's guys around you, you're going to make a deke, but then obviously you go for the shot. And with his quick release, it works because you can blow it by a goalie from that distance, right? So
100%. If he plays the way he was playing when he was up here for that cup of coffee, I mean, you're talking about candidate for rookie of the year.
yeah,
It's
was playing a
obviously going to be
game.
impossible because it's
Uh,
going to be Bedard,
yeah, yeah,
probably his
yeah.
rookie year. But
If it was this season, who knows, right?
yeah,
Also, to mention, Lixell gets 2 assists, so he's on the
yes,
scoreboard as well.
thank you. Good point.
Big save from Urson as well to end the game. So Maki Samaskevich, that was the prospect kind of everybody was harping for in the Giroux trade. He's with the Checkers, obviously, because he's in that organization, but um, he has a chance to score with seconds left, and Urson makes a huge save. So I thought that was obviously crucial because or else it's overtime. But Urson, I mean, was a story. I mean, he played really well. He was solid. And when the team looked like they were faltering a bit, and Charlotte's coming back, obviously he left in a couple of goals. But when it comes down to it, he makes the saves that are needed for the team to win. So I think it's overall it's a good start for the Phantoms. I mean, it's encouraging that they, even though they're up 4-1, and you don't want to see a team give up goals or choke a lead away or anything, but it's the playoffs. It's going to be competitive. You can't expect other teams not to push back. So you want to see them hold that 4-3 lead late. That's a really great sign for them just defensively to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I also do want to mention that Bobby Brink, while he didn't get on the scoreboard, I noticed him a lot out
Yeah, it
there.
looked good. Yeah,
He
he's a
looked, he looked,
bulldog, man.
yeah. It was interesting that he didn't walk away with the point in that game because there are several plays that he made where
There's
it
chances for
was,
goals.
yeah, it's like blatant chances for goal. He only had 2 shots in the game, but I was a little surprised that he didn't get on the scoreboard at the end of that one. But it shows the amount of weapons that the Phantoms have, and for the AHL level, this is looking like a pretty good team. And even Emil Andre just kind of got down there, is already playing a big role. And let's talk about a couple additions that happened for the Phantoms. We'll make this in here. So recently, the Flyers actually signed Brandon Fury and Matt Brown from the NCAA. Brandon Fury is already playing with the team. I think Matt Brown only has a PTO, and I think Fury was given a contract. I'm not 100% sure on that.
I believe Brown was given the PTO. You're correct. I don't
Yeah,
think Brown has gone into any games yet, so I'm not sure. Like
I
maybe it's
don't know if he will be.
I think maybe more just depth for the playoffs potentially, or
Well,
what they're looking towards. But
here's the interesting thing, and again, I don't know either player very well. Well, I will say Brandon Fury looked great. If you
he's on
guys
the
are not,
first line with
yeah,
Anisimov
I
and
was gonna
Forster,
say
so
if
they
you're
think
not,
highly of him, obviously.
yeah, if you're not aware, he's already playing the first line, like Vasili is saying, and I think he had a game where he put up a goal and 2 assists as
Yeah,
well. So early on, he was already a point per game player in the AHL in his early career. I did look at his numbers statistically. Offensively, he didn't really put up big numbers in the NCAA. I don't know if he's like a point producer, but he seems to have somewhat of a pro game already, obviously. The other guy, Matt Brown, actually has very good NCAA numbers. That's why I was a little surprised that he's not playing because he actually produced over a point
Yeah,
per game at the NCAA
let
level.
me read the numbers out here, Yariv. So
Yeah, go ahead.
for Matt Brown, who's on the PTO that has not played yet for the Phantoms. This past season, he was playing for BU. He had in 39 games played 16 goals, 31 assists, and 47 points.
Yeah.
So he had a pretty solid season, over a point a game. And then Brandon Fury had in 39 games played this season, 9 goals and 19 assists for 28 points for Minnesota State University Mankato. And then last season, for that same university, he had 44 points in 44 games, 3 goals and or 3 points in 3 games, 1 goal, 2 assists for the Phantoms this season. So it definitely both of them seem like they have some scoring prowess, some touch, but I'm interested to see kind of like where their
Well,
place is, or what, maybe if they're looking for these guys to kind of be like long-term slots on the Phantoms next year, just because there's so many young guys they're projecting to kind of
no,
come
no,
up, right?
I think that's spot on actually. And the most interesting thing about Matt Brown is he was actually second on Boston University's team in scoring,
They had a good team, so
one short of top, and then number 4 on that team is Jay O'Brien. And the interesting part is that the Flyers walked away from Jay O'Brien for a second round pick and then signed a guy who outproduced him on the same team. Again, I don't think that necessarily translates to pro. Like I don't think that means he's
but
immediately
they
going to
might see more
produce.
pro upside than him just by signing him. So like, why wouldn't we sign this guy and then we can still get a second round pick? So it just makes all
It
the more sense,
it
right?
looks like they're like, yeah, well, we like this guy too. We can take him. We'll give him O'Brien's spot. And then we'll
And get a
take the
pick
second
out of
round
it.
pick. So I think these are kind of under the radar
But
moves
it's
because
savvy by
nobody.
Briere, yeah.
Yes, they're pretty smart. I mean, I don't know if any
In
of them
terms
are
of
going to pay
managing your
off.
assets,
Yeah,
yeah.
but they're also older guys. They're both finished college, so they're not walking in as teens. And you see what happened, even with somebody like Jackson Cates, who, again, I don't think he's going to be playing with the Flyers. Maybe he'll make it next year. I don't think so. But a guy who obviously came in as a pro, like
Yeah.
immediately. And
Um,
go ahead,
Oh
please.
yeah, I wanted to mention like I saw Zamula scratched. Is that
Injury,
injury related?
injury.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
I
he's
wasn't
injured.
too sure because I saw he
Yeah.
was scratched, but that's unfortunate because I assumed
Yes.
he would be in, right?
They could really use him too. That I
Yeah,
mean, it's a big miss from their defense. They're lucky that Emil Andre. I mean, they have a pretty deep defense for that level, and Wyatt Wiley was playing, but I think
but
Wiley probably would have been scratched if it.
yeah, I think with Zamula in there, that decor is even another level probably,
Right,
right?
exactly, because he's arguably their best defenseman.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's a big loss for them. But it was nice to see the Phantoms win. I mean, they're not a bad AHL team, and hopefully it's not just this year. Like I would love to see them go on a cup run. I mean, when they were up 4-1 in that game, they just
yeah,
took over, and you're like, oh shit, the
they're
Phantoms
looking
are
pretty dominant. Yeah,
yeah, they looked dominant when they went up 4-1. So hopefully they can win dominantly and then really take momentum into the next round because getting in the next round is big.
yeah,
We really want to see these guys go for a long playoff. One, it indicates how good they are. Two, it's the experience, the level up in competition, see how they are under pressure. You almost kind of wish that Cam York was playing down there right now, but
yeah. But I
not that he
understand
needs
why.
it.
I
Yeah, yeah.
understand why they didn't do it.
He is NHL ready. It's not going to change his readiness, but it would still be good experience. All right. Anything else you want to say about the Phantoms?
Oh no, that was pretty much it. I mean, we'll see how kind of how they perform as the games go along. But like I said, I think just the experience that these guys are getting, that's the main thing. So the longer
Yeah.
they kind of get to play is probably a better thing for the Flyers long term, right?
And for those who are interested in watching, you can go to I think it's watchahl.com, whatever it's the AHL.com, something like that is the AHL's website. You can sign up now and you get $30. It's all access to all playoff games in the AHL.
Pretty
So
good deal, yeah.
yeah, it's not bad. And you can watch the Phantoms here. Hopefully they give you more than a couple games. But obviously we signed up for it to follow the team. It's important. Okay. Let's go on to our next topic. You brought this topic up, Vasili, so I'll let you lead. Central Scouting update. I think you have those.
Yeah,
There was a new central scouting update, and you want to
Yeah,
go
so
through
this
it?
is the final update basically that they put out at the end of the season, essentially just because all the junior hockey is pretty much wrapping up. So they have the North American skaters, and then we have the internationals. So I'm just going to read off like the top 10 for each. Obviously, no surprise, number one in the North American is Connor Bedard.
That's
Number
ridiculous.
two, we have Adam Fantilli. Three is Will Smith. Four is Matthew Wood. Five, Ryan Leonard. Six, Zach Benson. Seven, Nate Danielson. Eight, Oliver Moore.
Wow, Moore is
Nine,
that low?
yep. Nine,
Wow.
Samuel Honzik. And 10, Gabriel Perot. For the North American staters, I thought it was interesting that Andrew Cristal's 15. So he's pretty low, and he had like an insane season, and I'm seeing him in a lot of top tens. Same with Braden Yeager as well. So interesting.
Where was Jaeger? Where was Jaeger ranked?
Yeager was 11.
So right
Uh,
outside the top 10. But yeah, he
yeah,
dropped.
he dropped,
He was like 8 overall at
and
one point.
then the European, we have Leo Carlson is number one, which I
Hmm.
disagree with. Matvey Michkov's number two.
Yeah.
Dalibor Dvorsky's three. Edward Sale is four.
Steve
David,
called that, by the way. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
Steve absolutely called that
he
that was going to
did.
happen.
He did.
Yeah.
David Reinbacher's five. He's the defenseman that kind of looks to be kind of the consensus first defenseman picked, most likely.
Yeah.
Otto Steinberg six. Axel Sandin Pelika is seven. That's a great Swedish name.
It's an awesome
Lenny
name.
Haminaho.
That's also a
Daniel
cool name.
Daniel Butt. That's a great name. And you have Mikhail Galiev. I love Daniel Butt at nine because Butt is spelled B-U-T, like Daniel, but don't worry.
But don't worry about it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's awesome. But yeah, so like I mean, there's a couple things that jumped out to me, like just Andrew Cristal and Jaeger not in the top 10. It's interesting because you have like a Nate Danielson and a Samuel Honzik there instead, so maybe a little bit of late rising for those guys versus
Yeah.
the others kind of dropping. And
I
then I
wish we had a
mean,
second round pick. God.
yeah, right. Well, who knows? Maybe the O'Brien will turn into that, but we got Mitchkov at two. I think he should definitely be number one, and I like Carlson. I think he's going to be really good. I even brought up
Michkov's
stats.
the better player.
Yeah, he is the better player. I mean, there's obviously politics involved, and that's why he drops to two. But and I'm a guy who likes Carlson. I even brought up earlier in past episodes that like he's the first, I think, player to put up like close to a point a game in the SHL playoffs. It's like Forsberg, Daniel Sedin, Henrik Sedin. So like it obviously
No
shows
joke.
he's in good company. But just when you see the way Mitchkov's played and some of the highlights I've seen, but also
The
the
way he
fact that he's
moves.
like, wait, yeah, but just the fact he's breaking some of like Ovechkin's goal scoring records and he's shooting
It's
the puck as much as he is, like
it
it's just crazy.
You're not. He's
It's
not ranked. No, I'm sorry. You have to be out of your goddamn mind to watch a guy breaking the all-time. This is what Steve was saying. The
at that
all-time.
age, yeah.
You're watching a guy outproduce what will
Ovechkin at that
most
age,
likely
yeah.
be the number one goal scorer of all time, and
Yeah.
you're saying he's number two.
Yeah, so just for context, like Mitchkov's outproduced Ovechkin at the same age in the KHL,
Like
which is
that.
nothing to balk at.
It's
Like that's
not.
nuts.
It is not a kid-friendly league for those who are not aware.
It's
KHL is
very veteran
opposite.
heavy. Yeah,
If you're young and you're not ready, you play 3 minutes a night. Like you
yeah.
sit
They're
on the
playing him top
bench.
minutes, so it just kind of shows. I mean, obviously the concern is like when's he gonna come over, so that's probably why. Obviously the whole situation with his father passed away and rest in peace. Like that's crazy. I mean, they found him. I think just somewhere. I'm not too sure exactly on the story, but like there's something at play there, so I'm sure that's scaring teams off. I just don't think that the kid deserves it because I think he's
That's
definitely the clear cut number two. And who even knows, right? Like me and my buddies were talking about this kind of offline. We were saying like I would have loved to see Mitchkov in the World Juniors because then you could have really seen him go up against Bedard, and then you
yeah.
could really see what the difference is between the two, and we never really got that. So
No.
it's
Oh
hard to
man, that would
know,
have been
man.
great too.
Yeah, it sucks,
Fucking
but
Putin.
yeah, ruins it all. But whatever.
Yeah. No, that was a good breakdown. And again, that's why we keep preaching about Kolosov here and the Flyers' excitement over him. When you see a 19-year-old starting for a KHL team,
That's yeah, crazy.
it's not normal. It's
No.
very
Just
not
seeing a
normal
19-year-old goalie start for
and
any
excelling.
professional hockey league team, at that level is pretty nuts. Like even
Yeah.
in the AHLs, you don't see a 19-year-old
And
starting
and
sometimes. So
and just for retrospect, Ersan also had a great in a lesser league, played fantastic
yeah,
in the SHL. And Kolosov is outplaying him in a better league
yeah.
at a younger age. So just put that together. So the Flyers are safe in the goaltending. The Flyers have turned into a goalie factory, which is really funny. If you
Yeah.
watch Alex
Even
Lyon,
Alex Lyon, I was gonna
who I
say.
told everybody when people were shitting on him that he's only number 3, I said the guy still has a chance. How old is he?
He
27
made
years old.
what? Like what that one playoff series where he made like 99 saves in one game or
Yeah,
something? Or
in the AHL, you're talking about.
yeah, the AHL
Yeah.
exactly.
But I
Couple years
mean,
back.
what he's done with Florida, I mean, again, I don't think he's a starter in the league, but I do think he's obviously making the case that he's an NHL backup. And he's
Yeah.
27 years old. So, like, I think he's 27, 28. This is his time. This is what goalies are. This is when they peak. So, this is going to be the peak of his career, and it's good to see that he's getting an opportunity. All right, let's end on playoff predictions. It's been an interesting playoff so far. Let me pull up the teams here. There have been some results already, but we'll just go through the different series, and we'll say who we think is going to come out of these series. So let's go for the first one. Islanders and Hurricanes. Their second game is going on right now as we speak. They're tied 2-2. Hurricanes took the first game. I forget the score. I think it was 2-1. Yeah, 2-1.
3-1 or 2-1, yeah.
2-1. So Hurricanes took the first score 2-1. Um, I my pick for this is the Hurricanes in 6. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm taking Hurricanes as well, but in 5. I think
Oh,
they're gonna get on them quick, and there's not gonna be much the Islanders can do about it just with how good the Canes are. So it's my thoughts.
great. There are, I would say, almost every team, every top team in the East is a cup contender.
Yeah,
Just
I agree. If they get on a
except for New
run and
Jersey, in my
the
opinion.
things go right for them,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think New Jersey is.
I don't think so with Vanacek in that. I don't have faith.
I just think they're too young, and
That
as
too.
what I keep saying all the time, and we'll talk about that in a second. Sorry, did you want to say something else there?
No, no, we're good.
Okay. The next series we'll go through the Sabres and the Bruins. The Bruins took the first game 3-1. Sabres did talk some shit prior, from what I understand, how they were going to dismantle the Bruins. I like the confidence, but I see the Bruins probably taking this in 4 or 5.
Yeah, so I don't think the Panthers have much of a chance. I mean, Boston outclasses them 3-1 in the first game. I really think that they're gonna sweep them. So that's my opinion. I wouldn't be
Boston
surprised
is
if
so scary
Panthers.
good, dude.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Panthers get a game in there because it happens, right? It's playoffs. You're not gonna it's
Yeah.
hard to win 4 games in a row. But I just think with their defense and just their goaltending, like kudos to Lyon, but Allmark is a level ahead. So that's all I'm gonna
Well,
say.
and Bob, in his time has struggled in the playoffs, even though he's had elite
Yeah.
moments, in the regular season. He's
So
never been a
I
great
can't
playoff
fault them for
goalie.
going to Lyon, to be
I,
honest, just
I,
with
I
what
will
they've
say I
in the
don't
past.
think that Florida lacks talent to compete with the Bruins. I think the Bruins are just insanely good.
Yeah, and they're just structures unmatched.
They're
Like,
in they had 65 wins this year.
yeah, and
It's
crazy team.
crazy. Yeah, and the NHL or EA Sports NHL already simulated and had the Bruins winning the cup.
Oh,
Shocker.
not surprising. Yeah.
Shocking. All right, next series. Let's go to the West here. I'm just going day by day. The next game is the Wild versus the Stars in a series. It was a double overtime win for the Wild in a 3-2 victory over the Stars. So I'll tell you right now, the Stars are down 1-0 prior to that game, and I still stand by that. I took the Stars, and I'll still take the Stars in 7. But I wouldn't. I mean, I think it's obviously extremely even game. I mean,
Yeah, so I take
good
Stars in
matchup.
7. I take the Stars in 7 as well. I think they're the better team. I think Ottinger's a really good goalie, so I think I'll pull it out for them.
Though
Um,
they did just lose Pavelski.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to kind of see what happens. They still got a deep team. I mean, I was talking with my buddies about this. I think I was saying that like before even we discussed like this is probably gonna be the closest series. This is gonna be the series that I'm gonna watch the most. Just I think it's so close for both teams. So
Yep.
yeah, I'd say Dallas in 7. And then I think one of the other series, and it's the one I think everybody's interested in, is Tampa versus the Leafs. So let's give our predictions there. Tampa's up 1-0. They dismantled the Leafs 7-3 at home last night. I mean, I'm from Toronto. All the people that I know who listen to this that are from Toronto aren't going to like me after I give my prediction. But I'm going with Tampa in 6 games. The only hope I think for Toronto is if Hedman or Cernak are out long term. That's my prediction.
My heart tells me Toronto in 7. My hockey brain tells me don't bet against champion
Tampa,
teams.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and they have obviously the advantage in net.
yeah,
I really want to see the Leafs make it past. I think they deserve to make past the first round. I think they put together a damn good hockey team. And I think it annoys me that it's shadowed by misfortune, unlucky matchups, and honestly, a lot of it their fault, But I do think they put together a hell of a squad, and I think it's a shame to watch. If Dubas is getting fired and all after all the hard work and all the stuff that he did there, all the turnaround to just completely fizzle out is a shame. Um, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to deny that it looks like Tampa Bay is going to win this series. Just if you just judge off the first game, I'll stick with Toronto in 7. But my gut tells me, like my actual brain tells me otherwise. And I'm not a Leafs fan in any. I'm just tired of it. I like want to see them break through. Next matchup we have again on the West, Kings versus the Oilers. The Kings take the first one in overtime 4-3 over the red hot Oilers, who came in scorching hot. Personally, I take the Kings. I take the
yeah.
Kings in 7.
I take the Kings in 6 games.
Okay.
I just think what it is and reason why is personally I don't think the Oilers goaltending is going to be up to par for them, and I think Korpisalo is actually a really good goalie, and behind the Kings kind of improved defense with him, they'll have more success versus what they have running with Skinner and Campbell.
Did you
So,
realize that the Oilers have 3 100-point players this year?
oh yeah, Nugent Hopkins, it's nuts, man. He has like 67 points or 70 points on the power play,
Yeah.
something like that.
And that's just more proof that this high end talent statement, I can't stand it. Because it has nothing to do with putting together a championship caliber team that you need the best players in the league. I will say I just don't. I think they're getting closer. Like I wouldn't be shocked if the Oilers won this series. I think they are getting closer. I don't
I
think
I
like
think the
if
Kings are more built for the playoffs. Just the
yes.
way their team is kind of set
And
up.
I think Edmonton is working towards being built for the playoffs. I think this is by far the best team they ever put together.
Yeah.
Personally, this is one where I think if they do beat the Kings, people should be very afraid of them, because if Connor McDavid learns how to win in the playoffs, he is going to be unstoppable. He's still kind of there. I think they're maybe a year away from hitting that next level, but I do see them on the bubble of being a true contender.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean they went to the conference final last year, so like they had success in the playoffs. I just think their run last year, I mean, I don't know. I just think this Kings team's better
It
than people are
reminds
giving
me
them
of
credit them
it
for.
reminds me of
So
like the Capitals, when the Capitals were like an amazing regular season team, but
yeah.
like they weren't necessarily like they didn't have it in the playoffs
That's kind
until
of well, so I was gonna
until
say
Trotz got there.
Edmonton and the Leafs both remind me of that.
Yeah, and that tells me that maybe Edmonton will go for a new coach again down the line or something like that. We'll see. But I do expect them to lose in the first round, and which is crazy to say because they had 50
I
wins.
know, but it's just
Um,
that's our thoughts, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, next series we got the Rangers and the Devils. The Rangers take the first game 5-1 against the higher seeded Devils. Look, I didn't expect 5-1 in the first loss. I do expect the Devils to lose this series. I don't even know if it'll go to 7.
I think
Uh,
Rangers win in 5 games.
Dude, I'll be honest. Well, one, I think the Rangers match up against the Devils equally. I don't think the Devils have any level of talent above just because their record's better. I don't think that they're more talented than the Rangers in any way.
No, yeah.
And the Rangers have all of the experience and the best, and arguably the best goalie in the league.
Yeah, that's where it comes down to for me.
So
Like, you look at Vanacek versus Shesterkin. Like, yeah, I'm taking Shesterkin every day. I've never been a big Vanacek guy. I didn't really like him with Washington. I think eventually New Jersey will need to upgrade their goaltending to
Yes.
really compete. I just think if you look at the Rangers, like think about they got Kreider, I'll look at the playoff experience, Patrick Kane, Panarin, like they just have so much experience compared to the unexperienced Devils. Like it's just a no-brainer to go with the Rangers
Because
plus the
it's
goalie.
not a young man's game. And I'll say it over and over again. Everybody
Usually when
keeps
it comes
saying
to
it to
winning,
me, yet all of the evidence points that it is a veteran's game.
at least when it comes to winning, yeah,
When it,
it seems like.
when it comes to winning. Well, like to that point, the regular season and the off season are different animals. And the regular season,
Yeah,
young players can excel freely.
postseason's a lot
And
harder, right?
it's a mistake-free hockey. You have a lot less space. It's incredibly more physical. Yeah. All right, two more series. Next series we have are the Jets and the Golden Knights, and this is honestly a shocker of a first game. The Jets beat the Golden Knights 5-1.
Really?
Yeah, in the opener.
That
Which
shocked you? Okay.
really?
I okay. This is my thing, man. The Jets are first. Or I mean, not the Jets. The Knights are first in the West. I never like bought into go to Vegas this year, and reason being, I like their team. I just like Logan Thompson and Net. They had Laurent Brossoit. Like, if you're gonna go far in the playoffs, like
It's
I'm a
not with
goalie.
those
I'm
guys.
a goalie guy. It's not gonna be with them. And if I look at the Jets, who do they have in net? Connor Hellebuyck, and
Connor Hellebuck.
that's who they're gonna go far with. So like,
Fair
I
enough.
just in playoffs, I've seen it so many times. At least watching, like a lot of time, it just comes down to who has the better goalie.
And why would you
Between
move Carter Hart then,
I
huh?
don't think you should, but I mean that's what it comes down to. And I think if you are the Jets going up 1-0 and having Hellebuyck on your side versus the goalies that Vegas has, who don't have much playoff experience and are now have all the pressure on them, I love to be where the Jets are. So like, I think this one's gonna go 7 games though. Like I think the Jets will put up a good fight because they have a really good team offensively. But I think the Jets will take it nonetheless.
I'll give you that. I'll be honest with you. I think you make an excellent point. I would have picked Vegas
Yeah.
prior. I'll still stick with. Well, it's hard to stick with Vegas after they lost to 5-1. I did initially think it was going to be Vegas in 7, but we'll see. It looks like I could be very wrong about that. But getting 5-1 that's a bad opening night.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially on home ice too.
yeah, it's no bueno. But it's good. I'm honestly I'm happy for the Jets because I think financially they're in a little bit of trouble right now. And winning a playoff round against Vegas would definitely help
Yeah,
financially.
100%.
100%. And especially the way things ended last year, when people talk about trade. Remember Mark Scheifele was gone, by the
Yeah.
way? He was gone. He was traded. He was
And he didn't get
absolutely gone.
traded. Yeah.
I just want to point that out because, like, this is why I don't like rumors because it's why I don't
Never
even like the
know.
pro ride. It's like, oh, they're gone, or even Hayes, and it's like, oh, somehow they're still here. And then they never leave in the end.
I know,
So
right?
I've seen that too.
Yeah, pretty
Uh,
much.
all right, and then the last series we have is the Kraken versus the Avalanche. The Kraken take the first game 3-1.
I thought that was very interesting. I was watching some of the
Yes,
game. I mean, I'm still picking Colorado to win. My initial thought was them in 5. I don't know if it's gonna be that. I mean, they have to win 4 in a row now for that to happen.
yeah,
So I'll go. I'm gonna go with them in 6. I still think they bounce back. The X factor for me, with Colorado is going to be Georgiev. It's
yep.
really his first playoff test, whereas Grubauer has playoff experience. How hilarious would it be to see Grubauer stonewall
The team that
the
that
team that
didn't believe
traded?
in him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
didn't bring him back, and so I think that would be an interesting story. Seattle is playing a really good 5-man team game, so like they're sneaky good and they're really fast, so
Ter-
they can keep up with Colorado in terms of like the speed game. So
yes,
it's going to be a
terrible,
good series.
terrible coach and idiot, Dave Hackstall.
Known idiot,
Yeah,
yes.
known idiot. Just like all the other guys we fired, known idiots.
Craig Berube, right?
Yeah, they're all idiots. Now, I guarantee, look, I don't want Hextall back here. That would create too many problems, but I guarantee that people are going to call Hextall an idiot now and all this stuff. And this man is not an idiot, okay? It's almost zero chance. And he will find another job. All three of them will.
Yeah.
All right. Did I answer that? No, I didn't answer that. I will obviously still stick with the Avalanche. I would have gone with the Avalanche in 5 probably as well. I'll go with 6 to be safe. We'll see. I mean, they could definitely blow it in the first round.
Hey, that happens
Kraken or stingy.
sometimes. Yeah, it's Kraken or stingy, but also like how many times have you seen a team that wins the cup get ousted early the next season? Sometimes it's hard to play that much hockey in such a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
who knows, right?
Yeah. And then we can stop. One of the things that bothered me is that everybody was already naming Cale Makar as like a franchise caliber defenseman, and I agree. I mean, the potential is there. I just I like, it feels like some guys have like different criteria. Like they have one great season and they're considered the best thing ever, and then other guys can have like multiple great seasons and are not considered the best thing ever. And I think exciting players, people jump on them quickly. I don't think this doesn't mean that Cale Makar is not an elite, potential franchise defenseman or maybe a franchise defenseman. But it does show where, if you really look at the best defenseman in the league, it's Victor Hedman.
Yeah,
This is like I've talked about it
that's
before.
gonna be the blow. I think. I mean, Makar's obviously on another level. I think defensively his
Offensively,
game,
he's
yeah, his
insane.
game. I think defensively his game isn't there yet. I think as he gets older, because he's still so young,
Yeah.
he's gonna get really good and get on that type of
Well,
level. I just
I
think.
mean, Eric
I think
Carlson is not the best defenseman.
no,
He's
exactly, but
incredible, but he's not the best
He's the
defenseman.
best offense man.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Best offensive man on defense. And he's good enough on D. I think
yeah.
Paul McCarr can
I
be better than
I
that,
think
but
when you have those, you're bringing up those points like those players do. You live with the
100%. Like, don't
you
get me
live with it,
wrong.
right?
That's a guy you can build a team around in McCarr. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
put, I just, and he's still having a fantastic year, but
I
like,
uh I
he's
haven't
also
looked.
can't carry a whole team.
No, 100%. I haven't looked at Hedman like his injury. I gotta look into that, but
I forgot about that.
that's gonna be the big thing for that Leaf series. So I'm interested.
I forgot about that. If
Uh,
they lose Hedman, that's a whole different series.
man, I could see Tampa winning the cup again. Like people think I'm crazy when I say stuff like that, but fuck, their team is so good. Like,
I agree with you. I don't know how anybody beats Boston this year.
no,
I
I
don't
hear
know
you.
who it is. Like, who's it
Well,
gonna?
yeah, I know. It would have to be. I feel like whoever beats Boston, it's gonna be a combination of
Carolina
no, it's going to be a combination of like their defense being really stingy, Boston can't score, and their goalie it just
playing
stands on
out
their
of his
head.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So there's
has
like
to be
there's only a couple teams I look at that I think have the goalie that can do
Rangers.
that. So I go Rangers and I go Tampa because you get Shesterkin and Vasilevsky can both I think stand on their head.
Yeah, look, I think that's fair. I just don't see anybody beating Boston. They're so good,
Yeah, I think
and
they're
they have
gonna.
Swayman behind Allmark.
I
It's
mean,
not
just
like,
to say, like, who's your cup pick? Is it Boston?
yeah. I mean, I have to be
Yeah,
crazy not to pick
that's
a
my.
historically good team that is awesome at defense.
I'm Boston or Tampa. I definitely think it's going to the East, nonetheless.
Yeah, I think all the best teams are in the East, and I think it's kind of obvious. I think a lot of the Western Conference teams would be lower seeded if they were in the East.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. All right, this was a long one. Let's cut it. Anything you want to leave people with? Any updates, Vasily?
I'm gonna have like a pretty kind of expansive article this weekend, just kind of like detailing the season overall, looking at some stats and stuff like that, just like record, power play, penalty kill, all that type of stuff. So keep an eye
Awesome.
on that on Flyers Nitty, everybody.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and again, Gym Steak's not open. That's why I'm not advertising them anymore. When they open, I'll start advertising again. But for everybody who listens, please like, subscribe, share. Please give us a rating on Spotify or iTunes. Humongous help. Again, thank you everybody, for listening. And it's the end of the hockey season, but if you guys have just joined, Vasily and I are all year. We don't stop for the off season. We keep the same schedule. And we'll have more stuff to do. We're talking to Nasty Knuckles about doing something potentially, and we're talking to other people. We'll have more updates and stuff like that. But again, thank you guys so much for supporting us. We're gonna continue to drive the show in an upward direction. Hopefully, we can build upon this and make it even better, have better content and all kinds of stuff. So again, thank you everybody for listening. Stay patient. It's a virtue for a reason. We love you, and remember, always stay ready.